Hello guys, today we're going to see a Surfcaster Legend Arrow League starter. This build is fast, strong and requires nothing to farm the endgame. You want a build like this to farm currency and play whatever other builds that require an investment. You're going to see the tree, the skill, the gear, the progression, an endgame early version and a quick analysis of a different angle going with the Blind Prophet Ascendancy instead. I have created this POV with all the leveling trees, as you can see, one for each act, and then for early maps, one for each act. Let's see it like this, one for each act, the following progression, then one for the early maps. This is wide maps mostly. Once we start leveling up, we are going to add more points in a tree, then the yellow maps version and a red maps version. And then once we get the cluster jewels and all the other jewels, this is the last endgame level 96 version of the tree. Then I added here all the skills that we are going to be adding. Then all the gear. This is an endgame gear. Of course, you won't have this like day one, but this is what we're trying to aim. If you don't have, for example, the helmet yet, or you don't have boots like this, I added the notes, a section here with all the gear for all the mods that are good for each slot. So for example, if you don't have a ring that has elemental resistance, life, and all of these, then we're going to come to these nodes here and see the rings part. And here it says, for example, the tamings that are unique rings are a bit expensive at first, but they're pretty good options if you don't have a good rare ring. And these are the mods that we could get from the rings in this order: life, res, increase elemental with damage to attacks. This is already a pretty good ring early on. And then you can get other rings with these, and then some flag damage or some attack speed or increase cold damage, for example. This POV already includes the Ascendancy, so I have all the mods added here in this custom modifiers section. As you can see, I have the lightning damage converted to cold. So if we check the lightning arrow, we do no lightning damage because all that's getting converted to the cold damage instead. And as you can see, also we have the node that gives us the movement speed, the attack speed, and such. Also, I added the action speed that we get by reversing the chill, and the less damage taken because we're hitting and chilling enemies. And the increased damage taken I added as the shock because that in the backend is added together with other increased mods like shocks, for example. So I added the here instead of 50, it is 80 now. Okay. And of course, I didn't add any ascendancy. As you can see, we have no ascendancy, no other points. You cannot add points. So this is the perfect POV for the Surfcaster because it has already all your mods. If you want to change anything here, you can freely do whatever you want, and that will take into account the ascendancy, even though that's still not available in POV. First, I want to start mentioning that aside from the ascendancies, there were no balance changes on the skills, gear, mechanics, and so on. So every skill that was strong in 3.35 will still be going to be strong in this event. The major difference is that skills with less power before can have now its opportunity to shine. So skills like LA, Hexblast, Leering Strike, RF, Ice Nova, among others, are going to perform really well for sure, because they already did even without gear. So for the ascendancy, we're going to start with Ghost of the Deep. As you can see, this is so versatile because it gives us damage, attack speed, and movement speed. In my opinion, this should have been 10 instead of 30. This is like having 2 pair of boots. This is going to be amazing for the campaign and all the rest of the game. Then we're going to start battling to the left. We're going to get Stormy Seas, so we can get these other 2 nodes. As you can see, the Stormy Seas converts all of our lightning damage to cold damage, which we actually don't care because we are a build that does all 3 elemental damages. And the only thing that we care from lightning damage is the ability to shock. And by merging both damage, we are going to have more damage to have higher ailment effect. And since our cold damage now can shock, our cold damage is going to shock and at the same time going to freeze and chill. The only downside that I see from this node is, for example, for Expedition, where we're going to be cornered for cold and fire damage immunity mods. But aside from that, the node is perfect. Then we're going for the Glacier Wave, because this is a very good node that will gives us both sides a little bit of defensive, which we will a bit lacking from our ascendancy, and then some extra damage that are going to that's a modifier that's added together with the shock. So both mods are pretty damn good. And since we are going to afflict very high chills, this is almost always going to be a 30% more amplifier damage and a 30% less damage. This is like having 30-45 stacks all the time. And finally, changing seasons. This is the node that worries me the most. I think that the node itself is pretty damn good, but it's going to be a little inconsistent, mainly because we are an evasion build and ranged, which doesn't want to get hit. Still, we're going to get hit eventually and get the buff, but we're going to have those downtimes with no effect. I tried to see options to trigger this effect on demand and recorded some footage that I'm going to show you next doing it. I replicated the reverse chill effect with a pair of rings on a high evasion build and it actually felt fine. Then I tested all ways we currently have to self-hit and trigger this node. And the one that convinced me the most is Forbidden Rite. And it's going to feel more natural than the footage because we are getting 30 cast speed from the Ghost of the Deep's Ascendancy node. But in the end we're going to see how all of this feels in game. The Blind Prophet is the ascendancy that I would consider for this build, mainly because it provides many tools that are useful for a projectile attack build. These 4 nodes would be the ones that I would get. This one gives you a pretty nice critical chance, allowing you to crit cap fairly easily, despite of the requirements to have more accuracy, but this is a lot more easy to get than more crit chance. Then directionless, it's like an enemy minis, which only returns the 50% of the projectiles to you. This could feel enough, and if that's the case, we could use another support instead of the returning projectiles. And of course, the ring slot if you were to use it in the end game. And finally, this is the that I know that we already know, which is pretty good for to have more projectiles for more clear, but Lyric Arrow doesn't need that in my opinion. We already have one from the one base, 2 from the tree, and more from the quiver and the bow. All these stats are basic and they are good for the build, but I think that if you zoom up altogether, I think that the Surfcaster is better, and I will choose the Surfcaster instead of the Blind Prophet, mainly because I think that they are more special. The effects are more special, and that's all this event is about. And also because the Surfcaster has more defense side, because you force the enemies to deal 30% less damage to you. Instead, here we have the elusive effect, which, by the way, we can get in other ways, for example, from the boots. But the elusive effects gives you some avoidance that could be pretty good for a defensive side, and that's all that we get. And I'm very clear from the directionless, and that's basically it for the defense side of the Ascendancy.